On April 3rd, Rick Beato shared a new video called "Will These New AI Tools Make Songwriters Irrelevant in 2025?" I'm interested in this video because I'm subscribed to Rick's channel. I think that he makes interesting videos, and even when I disagree with him, which is honestly pretty often, I think that he has an interesting perspective on topics like the role of AI in music. And as it turns out, Rick's also kind of stealing my thunder. I've been working on a script for a video about my recent experiments with using AI as a tool to sort of like help me work on songs. You're really just trying to understand what the AI can even do. And I have, I think, pretty clear and strong initial impressions that I was going to try to share anyway. And now I guess I'm going to share them in the context of responding to Rick's video. And look, I know what you're thinking. This video is probably only worth your time if Rick and I disagree. And fortunately, we do. Now, maybe it's because Rick and I spent time with different AI services. He mentions 3 in his video, one called Suno, one called Murica, and one called Udio. I have spent the most time with the service Udio. That happens to be the one that he actually doesn't touch at all in his video. He spends most of his time with the service Murica and then a few minutes listening to things on the service Suno. But honestly, I don't think this distinction matters much for purposes of the points that I'm going to try to make in this video. Rick starts his analysis by listening to songs that were produced using the service Murica. And as he's listening to the first example that he clicks on, he asks,
I mean, does this really sound that different than pop country?
It's a rhetorical question, but a leading one. And though I get the point he's trying to make, I don't necessarily follow where he leads. I mean, if I heard this song playing on the overhead speakers at a Walgreens, honestly, yes, I would assume that it had been written by human beings who were just chasing a pop hit. But when I listen closely, I think there are some flags, obvious flags that this was written by AI. I'm going to talk a little bit later about AI's melodic choices, but I'm going to start by focusing on lyrics because that's the thing that stands out to me.
I see your pretty face, 'cause I'm in my head all of the time, and it's hard to stay away, but I don't want to lie to you anymore.
The lyrics of this song are bad, not in ways that you'd necessarily notice if you read them line by line. In fact, I think that AI can be pretty good at writing individual lines or maybe like couplets that make a lot of sense and are quite compelling, though I don't think the AI did that in this case. But it's when you step back and read or hear or think about those lines in the context of a larger verse, or God forbid a larger song, that's when they start to become suspicious. Because to me, the individual lines don't seem to connect to each other in any meaningful way. And that's true even in songs that are unlike Rick's example. Rick's example doesn't even rhyme at any point, as far as I can tell, which to me is a dead giveaway that it probably wasn't written by a professional pop hit maker. But even if you ignore the absence of rhymes, which honestly is kind of hard to ignore, the lines seem to sort of be little islands that are connected by nothing. They don't seem to have a real focus or goal or point or story that they are trying to tell by being strung together in this particular order. Instead, they just feel like individual lines that relate to a given prompt and were strung together in that order, but kind of at random. They may be unified by an underlying topic, but believe it or not, human beings look for meaning in more than just that. That's why storytelling is an art form, and why it's pretty easy for most people to distinguish between a good storyteller and a bad storyteller. And I think the AI in this case, as in most cases, is a pretty bad storyteller. So you end up with a bunch of individual lines that are on point, kind of, but also kind of generic, and there's not an obvious thread running through them. And I at least didn't find any individual lines specific or clever enough to really draw me in. And the result is that it's just a bad lyric, and not just a bad lyric, but a forgettable lyric. And the word forgettable is one that I'm going to return to often in this video. I think it's really, really important. There is nothing about this lyric that is memorable, or at least that's memorable for the right reasons. There are 1 or 2 lines that are like jaw-droppingly bad.
You're my country and I miss you.
But that kind of memorableness certainly doesn't count in favor of the lyrics. So once you get over the novelty of the idea that AI may have generated those lyrics in a matter of seconds, there's not really much there for you to sink your teeth into or that you would ever want to hang on to. Now, that doesn't mean that AI lyrics are altogether bad. I honestly don't say that because of any specific lyric in this first example that Rick was listening to, but from my own experience using AI music generation tools. I've recently been very interested in learning really what AI could do to help me enhance songs that were already written, or as a tool for sort of giving me like a jet boost in my ordinary songwriting process. That interest has led to a few experiments, most of which honestly have just failed.
Help your friends the night and knows on the breeze the satellites, but with some it seems like grin and skull, sure in your eyes.
But I did accidentally spend time letting AI write its own lyrics to a song concept that I had called Blackberries. I say accidentally because I actually had a full set of lyrics to the song and I wanted to see what kind of music it could produce to accompany those lyrics, but the AI just ignored my lyrics and wrote its own. And I'm gonna be honest, there were a few individual lines or line pairings in those lyrics that actually were really good. For example, in the middle of a bridge that it wrote for this song, the AI wrote the line,
"Thinking about those blackberries, you smile so wide. Wishing I could reach out and have you by my side. We used to chase sunset, now the days fade away. I miss those some moments and the games we used to play."
And in the context of a song that was about nostalgia for youth and for a close, like, brotherly relationship that was built during youth, that really seemed like it could be a good line. The problem is that that line was smack in the middle of a bridge, surrounded by other lines that in some cases had, I think, equal potency, but none of which seemed to really connect to each other. And moreover, were combined into something like a hodgepodge, like a kitchen sink approach to writing that bridge lyric. And as a result of that approach, it failed to tell a story. So I don't actually think that AI is that bad at writing individual phrases or lines or even couplets, or I've done some experiments with getting it to help me complete rhymes that seem difficult, and it's pretty good at coming up with rhymes, but this is only a small part of what it takes to write a lyric, because strong lines crammed together next to each other do not make a strong lyric. You need something more, whether you characterize that more thing as a story or a really specific personality or a particular focus or intent. There's got to be something there that elevates it above like stream of consciousness. And in my experience, at least today with the tech that's available, AI doesn't give you that. But you know what does? Pop country. Even like the worst pop country. And trust me, I'm not going to come out as like a strong defender of pop country in this video, but there is usually a unifying theme or story or focal point of those songs. Even if I think that point is stupid or overused, it is definitely there. Those songs give you the something extra that AI doesn't seem to offer yet. As a result, I think you can tell the difference between this kind of example and what you would hear on the pop country charts. And AI's ability to make this is certainly not going to render those pop country writers irrelevant. Now, there are cynics among you, and maybe Rick is among those cynics who would say, Jordan, why are you spending all this time talking about lyrics? Nobody cares about lyrics anymore. Everyone knows that melody is king. And can't you hear this AI creating great melodies? But, Rick never actually says that. But what he does say later in the video, he's listening to some variations of an existing AI song that he prompted the AI to create. And as he's listening to one of those, he says,
These songs seem to have more variation in them than a lot of contemporary songs.
You can judge for yourself by going and clicking on and watching Rick's video and listening to the example that the AI generated for him. I think the variation he's talking about is melodic variation, because that's the only meaningful variation that I hear in that specific example, and also because Rick talks a lot about the simplicity and repetitiveness and other sort of foibles of modern melody, at least foibles that he sees. So I can imagine him hearing the melodic variation that I hear and being happy to hear it. I actually agree, based on my experience with generative AI music stuff, that the AI is really good at creating a lot of variation in melody, but that doesn't mean that the variation is good. It's often not, and in fact, I think the variation that you hear in AI-generated melodies can be a dead giveaway that it is AI-generated. You can hear it in the example that Rick is listening to. The melodies have a shape and they use notes that change over the course of the melody, but like, is it really a shape that compels you? Does there seem to be a real story there? And more importantly, are any of those melodies memorable? To me, the answer is no, and I don't think it's user error on Rick's part. It's exactly what I've experienced when I have tried to use AI to help generate melodies. Like in that Blackberries song, what I wanted it to do was to generate a melody to accompany the lyrics that I gave it. I didn't appreciate that it was going to ignore those lyrics when I put them in the box and said I was inserting custom lyrics. But anyway, I did get to hear a lot of different examples of the kinds of melodies that AI does generate, and those melodies were just...
Dallas is an oven that chooks through bones are going back, way back.
Barefoot in the dry grass, space, black and dry grass and guy. It tastes like a dream, a summer day. I'm going back, way back, feels like the tune.
I guess the best word I could use is typical. Typical of the style that the AI has been given or that it has selected from its myriad influences as the basis for the music that it is generating. In my case, I prompted the AI to create something that was like Ziggy Stardust era David Bowie, which I had been listening to a lot at that particular moment in time. I'm glad to report that the AI ignored the David Bowie part and replaced it with glam rock. That's good for everybody who's concerned about AI blatantly using people's image, likeness, in creating new stuff. But then it did create something that I felt like I had heard before. And look, AI's not alone in doing that. I make music with clear ties to music that was made before. But there are differences between my approach and AI's approach, and one that's worth focusing on is that I'm not very good at it. If I sat down to write a Beatles song, I would not create something that sounded much like a Beatles song, certainly not if I performed it myself. But that's precisely the kind of thing that AI can do pretty scarily well. It's the kind of thing that worries people about what AI is going to do if it gets too much access to like the voices or likeness or personalities of specific famous people. Okay, but so how does this like typical parroting sound relate to Rick's point about variation in melody? It's story time. I have 2 kids, 6 and 3, and I like to play games with them. And one of my favorite games is to take a song that they know and sing a version of that song back to them, but change the words. So that instead of singing like about Carolina being in my mind, I'm singing about like, you need to pick your clothes up off the floor. And that always makes them laugh, and it's fun to do, but honestly, it's really hard. And in the moment, I realize how difficult it really is to cram new words into the existing melodic framework of a song like Caroline in my mind. So what do? I stretch the melody, I reshape it, I do little things to accommodate whatever specific phrase I'm trying to express. And that doesn't hurt the joke, like from my perspective or my kid's perspective, but it does hurt the melody. The variations that I'm introducing mess with the expectation game that music is always playing with listeners. When there isn't as much clear repetition, it's harder to set clear examples that then can be satisfied or delayed or even defied. What you end up with instead is something that doesn't have that clear melodic framework. It's just like an in-joke between me and the kids, an allusion to something that they already recognize, and that's why they like it, but it's not actually working melodically. I don't think it's an accident that the real-time variations in melody that I make in those silly games are surprisingly similar to the kind of weird melodic variations that AI introduces when it's trying to satisfy whatever prompt has been given to it.
It tastes like a dream, a summer day. I'm going back, way back, feels like the tune.
Because it's doing almost exactly the thing that I do in my game. It's looking at some very specific constraints and just trying to guess what comes next as quickly as possible to fill in that blank. And that is its goal, to fill in the blank, to finish the melodic phrase, not necessarily to write a good phrase, or God forbid, to arrange the rest of the song in a way that makes that phrase make sense and emphasizes that it's good and strengthens it. You know, all the things that you naturally think about when a person is writing a song. And I think every experienced songwriter thinks about, even if it's kind of subconsciously, just out of the experience of having written so many songs and listened to so much music and having a sort of clear idea of what you're trying to create. I don't think the AI has that kind of clear idea, that kind of clear story that it's trying to tell. And that's why you're hearing the variations. They're not signs of the AI being inventive in real time like a jazz musician. I think it's a sign of AI's melodic limitations. Now, later in Rick's video, he goes and listens to some of the trending songs on the Suno AI service.
How did it come to this? You just can't forgive. This can't be how it ends. Is it all?
This is AI.
Those melodies were a lot more like real melodies that you would expect a real songwriter to write. And do you know why that is? Because there is less of this variation. To me, the kind of melodic variation that Rick is probably just offhand commenting on in this video is a giveaway that we're dealing with a melodist that doesn't really know what they're trying to accomplish. Now, of course, this isn't something that only AI messes up. I have written some terrible melodies in my time, and a lot of what made them bad is the same kind of stuff that I'm observing in these AI melodies. I mean, take this early version of a song of mine called Rising Tide.
I don't suppose we had the time to harvest our scattered kisses and
I mean, there are like lyrics in there that I like and I've tried to reuse several times, but the point is that the melody doesn't have a very intentional shape. I'm just sort of doing little maneuvers to accommodate, I guess, my sense of what the harmony is doing and the words that I'm trying to say, and that little bit at the very end of the line, I just ended a line with some just like space filler words and sang a melody to fit those words. That's exactly the kind of stuff that I hear all the time in the AI, not a compliment to me or the AI. I learned that by practicing and by studying the works of writers that I loved, and then thinking critically about the work that I had done, creating this kind of feedback loop that I think naturally leads to learning. And I think AI is probably capable of that kind of learning feedback loop, but I'm not convinced that it's designed to undergo that loop. I think it's designed to be trained and to receive a prompt from somebody paying $10 a month for the service and just to spit out something that is interesting primarily because AI just spat it out. Before I move on from talking about melody, I want to zero in once again on this concept of memorable versus forgettable. When I was working on my Blackberries variations, I probably spent 45 minutes or an hour listening to the things that I was, I guess, encouraging the AI to develop. I probably listened to these AI-generated melodies dozens of times. And then immediately after finishing the song and downloading it, I thought it would be kind of fun to just go pick up a guitar and see what came out. As you might expect, when I sat down, the first thing that I played and sang was a variation on that original AI melody. And within seconds, I couldn't remember what that melody was. My attention just shifted to what I was going to play on guitar, and then when I came back to the concept of the melody and tried to remember the melody, I couldn't remember it like at all. And that's after I had spent, seriously, the better part of an hour listening to that melody. This is only one example, an extraordinarily small sample size, but it is kind of suggestive of the basic problem, right? The fact that AI can write melodies does not mean that AI is writing good melodies. And after all, that is what would render a songwriter irrelevant in 2025, is if AI could just spit out melodies that were better than what that writer could come up with. And while the AI can certainly spit out the melodies faster, I am not convinced that it makes melodies that are consistently better than my melodies. And if I'm in the same league as the AI, the professional songwriters in Nashville, or the Max Martins of this world, have absolutely nothing to worry about. Now, there's a 0.00001% chance that Rick Beato is watching this video, but if he is, he may be thinking, Jordan, you've kind of missed the point here. It's 2025 and no one is paying attention to music in the way that you are. Music has become background to busy lives and to TikToks, and in that context, I don't think people are going to notice the kinds of differences that you are identifying. And so I ask again the question that I posed midway through my video.
Can people tell the difference?
And if that happened, I'd have to look imaginary Rick Beato in the eyes and concede that, yeah, I think that this AI music probably could pass as background music if it had the opportunity to do so. I think one point that gets overlooked in this discussion is whether that is likely. Put another way, let's assume that AI can generate music like exactly the way that it does. Is it generating something that's actually going to be a threat to songwriters by attracting ears, attention, dollars that would have otherwise been given to those writers? And I think the answer is no, because even the best examples of AI-generated music are still generic sounding and forgettable. And despite what some folks, including maybe Rick Beato, think, fans of modern pop music are not seeking out or selectively coronating generic music. They like what they like, and they have reasons for liking what they like. Those reasons may not appeal to you or to me or to any other specific person, but they do appeal to and resonate with those fans. For example, I've noticed in modern pop music a tendency to use an exaggerated style of vocal delivery that in my head I call Alanis singing.
A little too ironic. And yeah, I really do think
It's this style where she's still clearly singing but exaggerating some aspects of the vocal delivery to make it sound also like she's talking. I hear that kind of Alanis or talk singing all over songs by Chappell Roan or Sabrina Carpenter, and honestly, I'm sort of ignoring the elephant in the room, which is hip-hop, where these kind of nuances of vocal delivery are part of what separate somebody like Cardi B from everybody else. And those vocal delivery nuances are hooks that attract attention and that help make songs memorable. And I think that's the bit that AI struggles with, at least today. It's not that AI has a problem generating the independent ingredients of a hook, but that it struggles to combine those elements and then use them in the context of a song in such a way that it feels like a hook. No, instead it seems to take all of the elements that it's produced, both those with hook potential and those without, and treat them more or less the same within the larger context of trying to emulate a particular style and cram them into a very specific song structure, blah, 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 blah. I assume it works that way because it's being asked to generate a song, not necessarily a good or memorable song. And I think if one of these AI tools was guided by a really experienced songwriter, it would help them write really good hooks and really good songs really efficiently. But that's because you have the guiding hand or the guiding ear of the experienced writer who does the important work of identifying the pieces that are good and then building the larger song around them. That's the context in which I think AI-generated music can really flourish, and I guess maybe the context in which it's going to threaten some songwriters. I think there's actually a really good analogy to an experience that I've had in my real life as an attorney. After graduating from law school, I went to work for a law firm, and like every other first-year associate at a law firm, I was not a very good lawyer. It's not because I'm stupid, it's because I don't really know what I'm doing. Law school does a pretty poor job of teaching you how to practice law. So you show up at your first day of work ready to learn, and you learn by going through something that's a little bit like an apprenticeship, where you are the apprentice and the master is whatever senior attorney has been given the unfortunate task of supervising you and editing your work. And in that context, the first-year associate's job primarily is to generate the raw materials for later legal work performed by somebody else. In the world of songwriting, I think that AI is currently qualified to perform the first-year associate role, so long as it is guided by a more experienced songwriter playing the supervising attorney role. Time will tell how much AI actually learns from that process, but what it certainly can do is assemble the raw materials for the more experienced writer to consider and shape into something that they know from their experience will look like and sound like and maybe even be a good song. It's important to note that an experienced person is not going to be nearly as open to suggestions as AI is designed to be. They're going to have a very specific idea of what a good song is, and they're going to take the shit that AI generates and fit it into that mold. That closed perspective is part of what makes an experienced songwriter so effective. They do what they know will be successful and nothing else. Today, AI does not do that. And I think it's unlikely that it will in the future, because to get there, it would have to sacrifice some of the openness that makes it such a novelty to just people who want to see what happens if you write like Poopiddy scoop in the style of the Beatles in a prompt.
You're exciting, boy, come find me. Your eyes told me, girl, come ride me. Girl, come ride me, come ride me. Boom, boom, girl, come slide, come spread your little thighs and drive it. Baby, you don't gotta lie. See, on boot, I made your pie. Let's mechanic for the boot hole.
Okay, I'm in the middle of editing and thought that it would be funny to actually prompt the AI to write that song, and it was in fact funny, but it also is a perfect example of the kind of novelty that this AI music generation does really, really, really well. And there may be somebody out there who thinks that that example undermines the points that I've been trying to make in this video. In fact, I think it reinforces them, because I think there's a big difference between like garbled Baroque rock potty humor that makes you laugh the first time you hear it and a song that actually has enduring value. But I also think that an experienced songwriter could do a lot with that kind of inventive madness. And that without that kind of guiding hand, an idea like this would ultimately prove forgettable. And I don't think forgettable music is a threat to anyone. Why? Because the internet is already flooded with forgettable music. I have written and recorded a lot of it myself. And no real, experienced, skilled songwriter is threatened by the forgettable shit that I produce or that anyone else produces, no matter how good it sounds. And this gets to the real point that I think Rick is making when he asks whether we can tell the difference between something this AI has generated and something that you might hear on pop radio. I think he's actually more focused on production value, on the recorded or generated sounds, than he is on the underlying songs that those sounds express. And in fact, I think it's production and, for lack of a better term, performance that's really threatened by this generative AI. Because the AI is actually really good at producing sound, at producing timbre. It's not perfect. You can definitely still hear artifacts and other elements that clearly are not what they are supposed to be.
It's like foot in the dry grass, they like it ryegrass and dry. A burst of color burns my
That almost sounds like a machine sound. That's so strange. Rick laughs at a few of those examples in his video, and I tend to agree. Those are some terrible versions of the sounds they're trying to emulate. But the best examples, like some of the songs he listens to on Suno, really do include impressive replications of even something as nuanced as the human voice. At least they're pretty good at replicating the nuances of the human voice that we're used to if we've been listening to pop music made over the last 25 or so years. Over that time, techniques like pitch correction and copying and pasting and using samples and beat mapping and snapping everything to a grid, these techniques have made music production much more efficient, including at the highest levels, with the most money at stake. And maybe that's why you hear those techniques all over pop radio. But all of those techniques, by design, remove human imperfections that the AI actually has a much harder time replicating. Like when I hear sonic artifacts in a really good AI voice replication, it just doesn't sound that different to me than the kind of artifacts you get from like extreme compression or pitch correction. Based on the little bit that I know about how AI does mixing and mastering, it's possible that things like Suno are actually using effects, plugins that are very, very similar to the kind of stuff that people would use in a DAW. So of course the results are going to sound similar. And I can see how that would be a problem, though not necessarily for songwriters. In fact, I think it's the performers, like the voices and faces of the pop music that we all hear. They're the ones who should be the most threatened by this new AI technology. Because if the AI has proven itself to be good at anything, it's at impersonating. And even if we have laws or can code into the algorithm like hard stops that prevent the AI from mimicking a specific voice, I don't think we can stop the AI from creating very, very similar voices. I think at its best, this generative AI is already creating human voices that sound like they could be real. At least as real as the voices that we hear in modern popular music. And I can imagine a world where a specific voice is honed and then associated with an avatar and then presented to the world as a front for songs that have been written by professionals. And in fact, some record labels are already pursuing that model, and I think it's with good reason. I think it's demonstrated best by an example. Which of these seems more likely? That Taylor Swift would have a #1 hit with a song written by AI, or that an AI avatar that's a little bit like Taylor Swift, but not really, would have a #1 hit with a song written by Taylor Swift or Max Martin? Based on my experience using AI generative music, I think the latter is much more likely. So I would answer the question posed in the title of Rick's video with no. I do not think the current AI stuff is going to render songwriters irrelevant in 2025 or anytime soon, but I think he should make a similar video digging into the question of who else might it render irrelevant? Because the AI may write forgettable music, but its powers of impersonation are undeniable and pose a very real threat to named artists, the highly paid faces of the music industry as we know it. If AI is going to cause a revolution in that industry, I think that's where it is. But tell me what you think in the comments. And for God's sakes, if you made it this long, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. And by the way, I've talked throughout this video about my song Blackberries, and I should probably close up those loose ends. I actually did write the song Blackberries, though it was only like conceptually inspired by the experience of using this AI, really a reaction to my disappointment with the outputs that the AI created. When I was strumming the guitar, meandering through brand new melodies totally unrelated to what the AI had written, I did sort of stumble upon a new chorus idea, fresh from the muse. Thank you so much. And I have since developed that into a full song. I'm going to play that song for you at the end of this video. Listen to it. Let me know if you like it. And let me know if you think it sounds better, worse, about the same as the AI music that I've played in snippets throughout this video. Let me know. Take care of yourselves. I hope you're well. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you around.
Through the brambles where they grew, I reach for a shape in the gloom, and I find two that still ramble into June. I pick 'em and run back to you. It's just like a dream, bitter and sweet. Blackberries gushing down my cheek. Without the rain, roots go deep.
myrtle tree. You swing down next to me, and we breathe in disbelief at bears big as thee. We both bite on the count of 3. 1, 2. It's just like a dream, bitter and sweet. Blackberries gushing down my cheek. Without the rain, roots go deep. You'll always be a part of me. Short sleeves in the sun, and barefoot in the yard. Those days glued us together, and now they pull when we're in the garden where we grew. See a place where it's been pruned, new fruit. Search the brambles for a blue